What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. We are always brought to you by our very good friends over at Play It Again Sports. Now, if you stop in, a couple things. They've got the merchandise. They've got all the new and used sports equipment and more, weights, basketball gear, football gear, soccer cleats gear, but they're really pushing and driving that golf equipment. So if you want the drivers, the wedges, the balls, it's all there for you. And if you tell me you heard it right here, BYP with Q, you'll get 10% added to your buy and then 10% taken off your order. With that being said, as we are fast approaching week 8 already, unbelievable in the NFL, our NFL guru, our insider, and of course, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game in Broad Street South. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on a Thursday edition of BYP Bucks and the Bills to kick it off. How are you, my friend?
Doing good, Q, man. We're almost to the halfway point, and we're still trying to sort this thing out. There's no undefeated teams, but there's still that glut of teams that are 3-4 or 3-3.
Yep.
And so we got a lot of sorting out to do, and a lot of football still left to be played.
Yeah, and I thought if you go back to last weekend, a couple things that stood out. I mean, we'll start with our backyard. The Giants get to win over Washington, everyone clamoring for days now that Taylor is better. Tyrod Taylor is better than Daniel Jones. He's not. It's just an asinine, lazy argument and take. And Taylor is a pro's pro, no doubt. He made a couple plays, but he also took a bad sack in that game. Also didn't leave Hyatt on a what would have been an easy touchdown toss. But with all that being said, a little juice, a little spark to the offense. Saw a carryover from Buffalo into the 14-7 win against Washington, where really the defense stood out. Now, is he going to be able to do it again against the New York Jets? And that defense, and you got to give the edge, really, if you think about it, defensively, right now, Giants are playing much better, but we know about the Jets defense. It looks and appears as though Taylor's going to get the start again because Daniel Jones is dealing with that neck injury. So, again, we love to back up. It's always Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning quarterbacking, if you will. But the bottom line is $160, $40 million guaranteed. Daniel Jones is going to be the starter for the New York Football Giants when he's healthy and when he passes all the tests and the doctors clear him.
Yeah, and Tyrod did a nice job in that game, and it was more of Saquon's show. He did nice. He had some good runs in it and kept his team in it until he had that bad fumble at the end. I thought of you immediately when that fumble happened, but the Giants worked their way out of it, and they still have some competitiveness to them. So, and I totally agree with you when you talk about that contract and the faith that the Giants brain trust has put in him.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go back to Daniel Jones, give him his opportunity. And the thing is that at this stage of his career, Tyrod Taylor he's a guy that he's good for short spurts, come in, help a team, give him a spark. And as you said, he's a pro's pro, a proven backup out there. And it was nice to see him do well as a backup because there were a couple other backups that played horrible this past week. In particular, Brian Hoyer for the Raiders.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, the backup position, it's exactly that in the NFL. There's a reason some of these guys are backups in the NFL. And you leave it there. Washington, they've got the Eagles. The Eagles had the big win against Miami. They were not penalized once in that game, and we thought it was a litmus test. We talked about two teams with the litmus test, Detroit being one, which failed with flying colors as the Baltimore Ravens ran roughshod over them. And then Miami going on the road against Philadelphia Eagles, where Tua did not play particularly well. Jalen Hurts had his moments in that game. Again, clean game from the Eagles standpoint, not so much for Miami standpoint. I thought Miami kind of got knocked down a peg or two. But if you look at that AFC East, Miami, New England got the big win over Buffalo. I think Buffalo takes it out on Tampa later this evening. But let's start with, the show me game. And let's go to Detroit and Baltimore, and then we'll get to that Miami and that Philadelphia Eagles win game. Look, do you just chalk it up to stubbing your toe against a very good Ravens team? Because Detroit, a lot of people, including myself, I have them making a deep run, being the NFC representative in the Super Bowl. Now, they'll catch the Raiders on Monday Night Football, laying 6 in that one. But is that just the Ravens are a really good team and Detroit had an off day, an off afternoon? Or, okay, maybe something's amiss here with the Lions?
Well, as always, it's a little both. But Q, I'll have to tip my cap to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. They seem to be coming on very strong at this type of season. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
I always look divisionally first, and they're looking like they're going to win that AFC North, and they're 5-2 right now. Uh, Total domination, as you said. The Lions came in there as a possible Super Bowl contender. They beat the doors off them 38-6. And Lamar was pinpoint 21 of 27, 357 yards, three TDs, no interceptions. And the Ravens piled up 503 total yards. So that just showed you how they were able to move this football up and down the field. Obviously, he'd like to find a main target, but he's still able to spread that ball around to 6, 7 guys. And this Ravens team, that defense is going to help them travel because that defense is very dangerous. They get pressure on a quarterback, and Goff was just not. He didn't feel comfortable in this game.
Yeah, they've got winnable games coming up, obviously, starting with the Raiders. But you look at a team like Detroit, they get humbled. Buffalo stubs their toe against New England. I think if I were to ask you right now, two teams that a lot of people penciled in to make the Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers, right? So just when we think we figured out with Buffalo, they lose a bad game to New England. And then San Francisco, I mean, listen, now you're dealing with the issue with Purdy and the concussion, but that was a bad loss for San Francisco. I mean, a team that prides itself on getting to the quarterback and defense, Captain Kirk had himself a frigging game the other day, close to 400 yards. Minnesota got a big win. So let's start with Buffalo. I mean, how much trouble are the Bills in right now? Or again, is this just one of those early season little swoon slumps here and there, nothing to panic about?
Well, Q, if it was a couple of years ago, I would say, yeah, there's nothing to panic about. But this team is not the same group from a couple of years ago, and McDermott is taking over that defense, and there's something amiss with this team. You know, now they're 4-3. They seem to kind of right the ship, and we're moving in the right direction. But you know, Allen 27 of 41. He still turns the football over in bad spots, and he had a rushing touchdown, which is good, but they're still not running the ball with any effectiveness
Right,
outside,
right.
which is their Achilles heel. And then their defense is very beat up. Yes, they're hoping that guys like Vaughn Miller are able to come back, and they've had some other injuries in that secondary, but it's a group that's kind of nondescript, and they're just not getting it done. So, you know, don't don't count out the Patriots, which is crazy to say at 2-5, but they got Belichick his 300th win, and you know, they look like they're ready to fight. Everybody thought collapsing for Caleb, but you know, they went out there and they put up a good effort. And now New England's going to play at Miami, and we'll see what they can do.
I look at the Bills laying 10 tonight on Thursday Night Football against Tampa. I think they wax them. They're pissed, they're angry. It's a bad loss. They're at home. Look at the offense of Tampa. Look at the offense of the Bills. But if they were to lose this game or not look good or lose a couple more games, and all of a sudden they got a lopsided record after 8-9 weeks, you really have to sit here and say this is not a legit Super Bowl contender. And maybe that window is starting to shut. I don't know. Is it just they're a sloppy football team? Do you lay the blame down to the head coach, who I think stinks, by the way, in McDermott? Is it the quarterback not on the same page with the wide receivers and the offense? I know they're a banged up team, but I'm looking at their schedule right now. They've got, after Tampa, they've got Cincinnati, tough game, but then they got Denver, the Jets, but then you have the Eagles, Kansas City, Dallas. They need to right the ship right now over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so they have their bye in week 13, and that's a ways away. And you're right, Q. High expectations for this team last year, the year before. Everybody says, okay, they lost in a close game in overtime to the Chiefs. They'll be back. Well, nothing's guaranteed in sports, and you can see this team has had some key defections. You had Edmonds. He went to the Bears, their middle linebacker, and they really haven't shored that up since Milano got hurt. And
Yep.
then the back end of that defense is extremely beat up. You know, the safeties are getting older, and a lot of the key pieces on that roster are getting older too. So, you know, they lost Knox this week, their tight end, and you're right, there's injuries, and all fingers are pointing at McDermott and Brandon Beane, their general manager, who he brought along with him. You know, they're going to be on a hot seat if this team continues to underachieve. I still think they'll get one of the 7 playoff spots, but in terms of winning that division, I think it's Miami's division win.
Um, what do you make of what's going on with San Francisco right now? And they gave up a lot of points, a lot of yardage to Minnesota. I know they're a banged up team. Purdy, unfortunately, concussed with that sneak. It looks like it'll be Darnold for San Francisco, at least for this week, because it's already Thursday. So it's a tricky spot right there. They showed the stats, after Purdy got his bell rung, and you can tell if you just go by the stats alone and now the body language and how he carried himself. Look, he looked like a player that was hurt and concussed. So he was 19 to 24 for 252 and a touchdown prior to the sneak, right? Then he was 2 of 6 for 20 yards and 2 picks afterwards. But ultimately, I know he was out practicing. It's kind of tough if it's Thursday, he's out practicing. Maybe he gets clear, maybe he doesn't. Be that as it may, what is going on right now with the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, the team is no longer any fear of them after that loss to Cleveland. Sure, they could have won that game, but on the key missed field goals, only 41 yards. But you know, they're not that unstoppable machine that everybody thought. And the Vikings, they're another team. They still had a lot of fight left in them, and people thought they were trying to get that number 1 pick, and they went out there and then they challenged the Niners, and they got after the quarterback, and you know McCaffrey, he was bottled up too. He only had 15 rushes for 45 yards, and he had the 1 touchdown. But the Vikings were ready to play, and particularly Hawkinson, he had 11 receptions in the game. Addison looked real good. He had 2 interceptions, touchdowns, and then the key guy you talked about was Bynum. He had 2 interceptions in that game. He had Purdy's number. So the Vikings, they were ready to fight, and the Niners, the road may not be paved in gold as they thought all the way to the playoffs. So they have a big game. Cincinnati's coming to San Francisco, and they're looking at this may be their third straight loss.
Yeah, I think there are so many teams that are flawed. The Rams are an inconsistent team. They're getting 6 against the Cowboys. All of a sudden, the Vikings get that win. They're 3-4, and I like them laying a 1.5 on the road against Green Bay. You can kind of dismiss maybe the fact that they're looking to trade Kirk Cousins. There's a thought. I want to go back to the Giants for a moment. If the Giants lose to the Jets, that at 2-6, it's a tough road, a tough hole to dig out of. Saquon has come out and said he doesn't want to be traded. That's all well and good, but do we really believe, A, the Giants are going to tag him again? Do we believe that the Giants are going to give him big money? I don't see it. If they were to lose this game, do you contemplate trading Saquon Barkley? Because they would be 2-6, and maybe Jones is not cleared in another week. So if you look at their schedule, and again, I'm trying to be objective as possible here. After the Jets, they've got the Raiders, but then they have Dallas. That's a loss. Washington, who knows? New England. I mean, I'm just saying to myself, this is a team that could easily be 2-7, 2-8. But the trade deadline is pretty much in a week or so. So, correct?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's
so
Tuesday. Yeah.
I mean,
Halloween.
yeah. I don't believe they will do it, but I think if they go out there and the offense stinks and they get blown out and Taylor looks bad, and you're thinking to yourself, 2-6, maybe we don't have Jones against the Raiders. 2-7, Dallas coming up 2-8. It's going to be one of those long seasons. Do you even consider that move?
Sure. I think a lot of these GMs are listening to conversations for players now. The key thing is compensation, and in terms of Saquon, they'll probably have to take a cap hit a little bit if they trade him. But why not listen? If a team's offering, I don't know, I'm just throwing things out here, second rounder or something like that for Saquon, why not take that opportunity to kind of build for the future? Because we know the Giants, as you said, even going into the game at 2-5, their season's on life support. So I think a lot of teams will look, but typically, there's just not a lot of big movement at these trade deadlines. Now, it was pretty cool to see Bynum get traded. Um, he gets traded from Tennessee to Philadelphia. I was joking on my show that Tennessee shouldn't even answer the phone if Harry Roseman's calling. He always
That's a good
seems
move
to
by the
be
Eagles.
fleecing them. Yeah. And Byard's going to be a very nice player for the Eagles, and We knew Edmonds was not a good fit there. He had a lot of coverage lapses in a short time with the Eagles. They sent him to Tennessee, but Kevin Byard is a guy that's going to help on that back end. And the Eagles, they're loading up, and it's going to be interesting because the two best teams, Kansas City and the Eagles, is right where we left off last year.
Yeah. So just a little housekeeping, even though Purdy practiced, still in concussion protocol. You mentioned that move by the Eagles. You're right. I mean, Howie Roseman does it again. Don't even pick up the friggin' phone if you're the opposition, especially if you're Tennessee. But they are filling in, the holes where they need to. I still can't figure them out. I'm still trying to figure out the identity because there are times where I think the head coach has lapses. I think sometimes a little too cocky, a little too arrogant. Everyone's looking at the analytics, and this is when you have to go for it. I understand all that, but I'm not going to chalk up Sunday night's win to their most complete win of the season because I also think that was a sloppy game. I thought there were a couple busted plays that could have went either way. The fact that they got away with a ton of pass interference calls. I mean, let's just call it, please. Let's just be honest. The refereeing in the NFL
It was laughable, especially that one face mask right
down
in
the
front
left
of
sideline, sure.
yeah, that was a huge play in the game. They
Well,
didn't
even the
call
pick,
it.
the other end, the pick, where I think Mozart got pulled down as well. But again, no one can stop the little tush push. I saw Joe Shad, basically couldn't let it go, was on Twitter, kept talking about it nonstop. Stop, right? The Eagles won the game. Miami lost. It was competitive for a little bit, but the Eagles flexed their muscle because Miami's not, we talked about it, right? Come playoff time, you got to be able to either slow it down a little bit, run the football. They weren't able to do that in that game. So the Eagles clearly are right there in the NFC. Kansas City is clearly there in the AFC. But let's not sleep on a team, say like Jacksonville, who's got a very inconsistent Steelers team. Steelers are 4-2. I have them making the playoffs, but I don't think they're a legit 4-2. I think they're a product of a couple breaks and a soft schedule. I think I overvalued that quarterback, to be quite honest with you. But Jacksonville 5-2, big opportunity for them now to start to stockpile wins. They're laying 2.5 on the road against the Steelers. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, Q, this is a good road test for a Jacksonville team that's trying to take that jump back into the playoff picture like they were back in like 2017 or so. And when I look at this, Trevor Lawrence, he's a little banged up with that knee injury, but he's playing very well in terms of getting the ball to ATN and also Christian Kirk and Ridley. So I expect them, to go into Pittsburgh as long as they can control that offensive line. Cam Robinson is going to have his hands full with TJ Watt. As long as they can block TJ Watt and Highsmith and the rest of those linebackers, I think that Jacksonville could win this one and possibly cover it. Now, the Steelers, we know offensively they're challenged. They get Deontay Johnson back, which helped them a little bit along with Pickens. But, you got to stop first and foremost that defense. You've got to find ways to beat them. And I think Trevor Lawrence will. This is going to probably be a close game, probably a field goal battle, and the Jaguars win.
Yeah, I just don't think offensively the Steelers can keep up with Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville is going to be able to move the football. I mean, the Steelers' offense is predicated to, chuck it up, throw it to Pickens, and see if there's a big play. I mean, that's really kind of what it's
And
been.
they have a few pieces like Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson I talked about, but these guys
Yeah,
are kind of middle of the road. And I don't even think they really like Najee Harris at this point.
they can't.
I could see them stepping away from that at the end of the season.
Because they're not running the football. They're averaging about 3 yards a carry. And that kind of tells you everything you kind of need to know right there. I mean, Pickens obviously is the playmaker. I mean, the kid's got 500 yards. Again, 1,000 in a season is nothing at the end of the day. But I do like Jacksonville in that game. Eagles and Commanders. Look, that offensive line, I criticize the Giants' offensive line. Washington's offensive line is really bad. And I know there's talk in DC about potentially making a quarterbacking change. I don't think that's the route to go. But for me, Commanders got to take a page out of how they beat the Eagles last year. And that's now we know the defensive line in the front of the Eagles is different with the depth as opposed to what it was last year. But that offensive line, when they upset them, they dominated the line of scrimmage. Washington did. They ran the hell out of the football. And again, the quarterback didn't have to do too much. They need to establish the run here. If they don't, and they keep that offense off to the sideline, if they do that, they have an opportunity to at least keep this game relatively close. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a ton of blitzes. You're going to see a lot of blitzes from the edge. They're going to try to be very disruptive. That kid's going to have to be forced to get the ball out of his hands quickly. I think that spells disaster. I don't even believe that you're looking at this game. Don't even tease it. 7, 7.5, 8. I think the Eagles win this game 31-10. I don't see how Washington is going to move the football. If they don't run the football, they're not going to be able to move the football against the Eagles.
Yeah, Kevin, the big thing is if they try to look past Washington like they did the Jets before their big game at Miami, because the Eagles, we know, have that big Dallas game after this one. They can't look past this team and take them for granted. But I do agree with you when you see the matchup of the Eagles defensive line, which is their strength. Let's not forget Jalen Carter turned that game last week against the Dolphins. He knocked one of their best linemen out he beat them up physically. And then you look at this Washington team, they're allowing sacks at a record pace. I think he may break David Carr's record from way back a day when he was with the Texans. They're talking about Hal maybe sacked 100 times this season.
Horrible.
And he's running for his life. So I expect Hassan Reddick and all those guys get going and decide defense and the Eagles to win this game kind of going away. So, yeah, I do agree with you. I'll say the Eagles probably win by like 10 points or so.
Interesting matchup. Browns and the Steelers. Both teams are 4-2. Seattle's laying 4. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Deshaun Watson stinks. He stinks. Like I just
investment.
no. It might go down as the worst move in NFL history if you really think about it. I'm not talking. Look, when you draft guys and they are bust, it's a mistake. You have egg on your face for a little bit and you try to regroup, you try to recoup. But Watson, whether he's just disengaged, doesn't care. Now, granted, I know he's banged up. The shoulder didn't even participate in Thursday's practice. But if you are Cleveland, that is a team that actually might want to consider, as crazy as this sounds, calling up Minnesota.
Yeah, and if you get them with a waivers, no trade clause, short, bring them in. They have enough weapons, Q. They won 2 straight games, and this is with PJ Walker at the quarterback position.
That's my whole point.
They're winning games ugly, and particularly with their number 1 rated defense. Jim Schwartz done a great job with that defense. I gave my game ball last week to Myles Garrett, who was just incredible. He's playing at a defensive player of the year level, and that's Cleveland's calling card. So, I could see them getting after Geno in this game and making it ugly. But the key thing, as you said, is Deshaun Watson. I don't think he's,
He
I
stinks.
don't think he's going to play. I don't think he's going to play, and I don't think Stefanski's crying about it. Last week he got cleared out concussion in the game. And then Stefanski said, I'll go take a seat, and we'll win this one without you. And they sure did. It was ugly, win 39-38, but they got it done. And PJ Walker does just enough and made a couple throws late that won them that game. And then, Kareem Hunt is running the ball as well. So, they may wait on Deshaun Watson, but they're not getting out of that contract. That's the big elephant in the room. That
exactly.
contract.
Exactly. But he stinks. He sucks right now. He's a horrible quarterback. You would think the year off, okay, you knock off the rust here and there. But if you look at 4 games, he's looked extremely shaky. He's looked disengaged. He looked disinterested. He was 1 of 5 before he got knocked out for 5 yards with an interception before he left the game. It's a disaster. Again, you'd have to maybe sit there and say, Kurt, we can make a run here with this defense. You got to waive your no trade clause. But the problem is Minnesota's won 3 of their last 4. They're 3-4. And they basically inserted themselves back into the NFC playoff picture. If I'm Cleveland, I mean, if Daniel Jones wasn't hurt, I would even say for Cleveland, make a run at Tyrod Taylor, not Daniel Jones, but Tyrod Taylor, solid backup. Indianapolis, if Richardson wasn't hurt, you're probably calling up about Minshew, but they have right now one of the best defenses in football. It's not a realistic option, right? If you think about it, but they need
with the cap logistics. I just don't see it.
I know.
It's going to be tough to bring. anybody in there because they're stuck with Watson. They gave him a guaranteed money contract, and there's I talked to a lot of guys in that around the NFL, and no one is feeling bad for him because when they gave him that contract, a lot of agents, a lot of people around the league were upset, and they said, "Oh, now you're getting your comeups," because this guy, as you said, he does not look right. He's damaged goods, in my opinion, and I just don't know if he's ever going to be able to get it back at this point in his career.
Think about what you just said. A couple years ago, we're talking about this quarterback as a potential NFL MVP with the Texans. I mean, we saw that drop off with Carson Wentz, right? But here's the difference. Every penny that you promised to Deshaun Watson at the time of signing him is guaranteed to, no matter what. He can fall off, God
Crazy.
forbid, a ladder, roll out of bed the wrong way, drop off another friggin'
Yeah.
massage table. It doesn't matter. He is guaranteed that
Yep.
money.
The only thing I can equate it to is basketball terms. Here in Philadelphia, they signed Andrew Bynum, one of the worst signings ever. And Bynum, I don't even think he played 30 games for the Sixers, and all his money was guaranteed, and he got it all, and it was an ugly ending.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not making light of what transpired off the field. Point being is he can just get hurt at any moment, stub his toe, or they can decide we're not even going to play you anymore. I mean, it was from a PR standpoint, I thought he should have been kicked out of the league. That's nor here nor there. I didn't think he was ever going to take another snap again in the NFL. Again, that's nor here nor there. He wanted himself out at Houston after signing a contract extension. But again, the first team, the friggin', hey, yeah, what do we got here? We're the Browns. I mean, that fan base deserves so much
there was
better.
a little bidding war between, I think, the Dolphins are involved, the Saints maybe, but nobody wanted to go to that fully guaranteed route. It just doesn't happen in the NFL today. And quite frankly, a guy in that position, yeah, maybe you give Patrick Mahomes a fully guaranteed contract, but definitely not Deshaun Watson coming off almost a 2-year layoff and all the politics and mess that he brings with him. And I know Jimmy Haslam, who's the owner of the Browns, is kicking himself, for that contract. But Stefanski is staying tight to his guns, and I think he'd rather have PJ Walker out there and just see how that defense does in the running game.
Isn't there something to be said, though, when the offense, like, again, you bring it back to what's going on with the Giants. I mean, they can't move the ball, really. They can't score. But you get a healthy Saquon. The offensive line gels a little bit. Taylor's not going to take a lot of shots. Point being, not a goofy chances, I should say. He likes to throw the ball, but he's not going to make a ton of mistakes. We saw what happened in the Buffalo game, and then Washington, as I mentioned, the bad sack. But some of these backups, you almost have to say to yourself, dollar amount be damned. I think it's different in New York with Daniel Jones because he led them to the playoffs last year. They won a road playoff game, and then they got overwhelmed against the Giants. I'm sorry, against the Eagles. And the Giants brass is thinking, we can win with this guy. I think Cleveland was so blinded by the name on the back of the jersey, and they didn't realize that he's not the same quarterback he once was. And once I cut you a check and I say, this is all yours, man. And you sit there and say, well, Q, what happened? No. You're good, man. It's yours. Take it. Don't worry about it. Anything you do from here, where's my incentive? Like, you would think you'd be a pride, you'd be a pro's pro. He's not that guy. He's not a likable dude. He's got issues, obviously. We know he's been disrespectful to women. I'm surprised he's back in the league. And I'm even more shocked that Cleveland, well, it's Cleveland, that franchise turns around and they give him the amount of money that they do. So now it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. I can't stick a guy out there who's banged up, who's disinterested, who sucks right now, and basically has no desire to want to play football. So
and they're winning without.
Yeah.
They're 4-2 and tied for the divisional lead. And the game manager is playing better than him because he's out there. He's not getting the football out there. You can see Amari Cooper is very upset in terms of Watson's just not getting him the football, and he's saying, all right, I'll just live with PJ Walker. So it's a crazy situation. And you're right. Eventually, head coaches just want to win. And Walker gives them the best chance. Contract be damned. they'll have Watson on the sidelines, and they're going to have to figure this thing out in the offseason because, as we know, he's not going anywhere, and it's just going to get crazy there in Cleveland.
So we know that it's hard to win in the NFL with some young quarterbacks, and we're looking at some bad football right now. So have a little patience in Green Bay, right? Okay, fine. Then you look at Chicago, right? You know, the Bears all of a sudden, they won a game, they're 2-5. Um, you know, the Chargers go in the opposite direction. You know, if they lose this one, it'll be a 3-game losing streak. Washington with Rivera, all of a sudden the bloom is off the rose with Eric Bieniemy. You know, again, you don't like to talk about it, but what are the chances we see a change in Chicago midseason, with the Chargers in midseason, with Washington in midseason, with those head coaches respectively?
Yeah, Q, if I had to put percentages on it, I'd probably say the highest percentage is Brandon Staley with the LA Chargers. His team is just, they're falling apart at the hinges, and he's had his opportunities, and each time his team cannot close games out, and they lose close games, and the defense, which is supposed to be his calling card, that defense is not getting done. A lot of big names on that defense. Derwin James, you have Joey Bosa, you know, Murray out there, the linebacker. They're just not getting it done, and they're not responding to the coach. So, you know, you got Tyson Badgett, Mr. Division II from Shepherd University. It's Sunday night football, so all eyes are going to be on this one. If they lose to the Bears, who they shouldn't, this should be a game where they just dominate, given that they have Justin Herbert and they still have some weapons like Palmer, and then
Yeah.
Eckler's back out there for him, and Keenan Allen. So, if they lose this game, yeah, I could see Staley. They could possibly remove him. Now their bye week is let's see, Chargers. All right, so they've already had their bye.
It's
So they had their
past.
bye in week 5.
They're coming off their bye.
Yeah, so they had their bye week 5 or so, and so it's a situation where he should have already cleaned this thing up, and if they don't get it done on national TV, it's going to be an ugly situation. So I could see him going. Now Rivera, the way this season's looking, I just don't think he survives. You got that new owner, Joshua Harris, there, and he's probably going to want to bring in one of his guys, because we know that Rivera was there to clean up Daniel Snyder's mess. So another guy probably on the way out.
Yeah, and I stand corrected. They had their bye after the Raiders win, which got them to 2-2. So
Yeah.
they opened up the season. I mean, this team loses close games. They lost by 2 against Miami with a chance to win. They lost in overtime on a field goal against Tennessee. They had a chance to win. They only beat Minnesota by 4. They only beat the Raiders by 7. They lost by 3 to Dallas. They lost by 14 in a game that was a little competitive, and then Kansas City pulled away. Is it the players or is it the coach? Because the players still have to make plays at the end of the day, ultimately. So, when you say a change might be needed, I think with Washington, it's different. I think that with Washington, Ron Rivera's run its course, and they really don't have a quarterback. Now, if you stick, say, Belichick with the Chargers and you've got a quarterback, maybe you got something there, right? So is it more about the talent not being able to clean it up, close things out, or is there something to be said, which we know at times the coaching has been somewhat suspect, especially late in games?
Yeah, I think his message is just Wayne. Brandon Staley, the team's not responding to him. As you said, it was they hung around for a little bit with the
Yeah.
Chiefs, but you just saw the disparity between those two teams. They could not cover the middle of the field. Travis Kelce had a field day, 12 catches, 179 yards, and a touchdown, and everybody knew he was getting the ball. And then offensively, Kellen Moore was trying to dial some things up, but they just couldn't get the ball out, and Herbert was getting harassed back there, and the Chiefs, their defense is really coming along under Spagnuolo. So, yeah, I'd have to point the finger at coaching, because they said that I think Anthony Lynn, when they got rid of him, I think he was around 10-6, and they said 10-6 is not good enough. And Staley was the bright new shiny toy, and then he comes from McVay's system, with his reference from McVay, and He's just not getting it done. And Eberflus has won a couple games with the Bears. Same kind of thing. A young defensive coach who you're in an offensive league, and they're not getting it done. So,
If
yeah, I
they
could see Staley leaving.
if they get embarrassed and they lose to the Bears, I can see him being fired come
I
Monday.
totally could. And you got Kellen Moore on his staff already, who's
Yeah.
a possible coach in waiting. This is his first season. They slide him over to that
Yeah,
seat.
and I'm going to tell you why, because the defense is not on the same page. And then you've got Eckler, who's been pretty boisterous about their offensive scheme. Um, you know,
And they have a lot of talent on this team, Q. Even on offensive
yeah,
line,
but
they have
Lloyd, when
good
you hear someone say you have no other choice than to have faith in Brandon Staley, right? I have no choice I have to have faith in Lloyd. That
right.
tells me I don't have faith in you. It's almost as though my hands are tied. I can't do anything about that. So that's not a great look for your head coach, right? So I look at it as the play calling's been questionable, even with the analytics, even with the way that he coaches or he game plans, how he manages the game late, right? It's got a little touch of Andy Reid in it from back in the day. The plays, the players, they're not resonating. They're not buying in. The defense is on one page. The offense is on another page. You have your star running back come out and basically say, we don't have a choice but to have faith in this guy. That tells you if they had a choice to have someone else in there, he would have been in there by now. So I'll say it right now. If they get blown out and they lose this game or they're a no-show and they're embarrassed, hell, if they win 20-19 in a sloppy game that's gifted to them, I can see them making a change.
Yeah, I definitely could. Telesco's the general manager there, and Spanos has owned that team, and we've known the Chargers. They were the nomads. They moved around. They play in a soccer stadium, and this is more eyes are going to be on them this week than have been on that team in a long time. And it's Staley's opportunity to put up or shut up. But I would agree with you, Q, that he can either save his season a little bit or it's over for him after this.
Rivera right now is at plus 200. I hate even talking about this. Plus 200, first NFL coach to be fired. I said last year he should have been fired. Staley's at plus 250. McDaniels is at plus 400. Your LaFleur's there, Matt LaFleur is there, LaFleur is there, Grable's there, Bowles is there. I mean, I have a feeling Tampa Bay gets waxed tonight. And look, you don't like to talk about it because these guys all have livelihoods, right? And they'll be okay because of the financial ramifications. They're not trying to stretch the dollar like some of us, but you just have to say, you start to wonder to yourself, like, hey, teams like Cincinnati, and I like their head coach. When is it going to click for them? Buffalo, when is it going to click for them? The Chargers have all the talent in the world. When is it going to click for them? So
Yeah.
it's
And let's not forget, it's 17 games, 18
yeah.
weeks. 18 weeks is a long time, Q. And for some of these guys that are limping along right now, yeah, that seat's going to get real hot. And then, you talk about the last 5 games this season, and they start, maybe we should turn the page for next year. And the key guy, obviously, is Justin Herbert. Does he believe in Brandon Staley and what he's putting out there? And I've heard there's some friction there, and there's not. They really never gelled like people thought.
Yeah.
So, if Herbert gives him talks to, Kellen Moore is like, look, I think we could do better. They'll definitely make that move. And Staley is
Yeah.
definitely on a hot seat. As I said, Eberflus, and like you said, you hate to see these guys lose their job, but in the NFL, it's a coaching carousel. They
Yeah.
move around a lot, and if you're not winning games, like Eberflus has won 5 games over the short time he's been with the Bears. Yeah, only 5 games. I think it's 5-20 something is his
And they got
record.
rid of
So
Lovie Smith. So
yeah, yeah.
um
So you got to win.
AFC top heavy right now, Kansas City, Miami, Baltimore, Jacksonville. And then you got the surprises, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. Then the surprise the other way, Buffalo, Houston, the Jets, big opportunity for them at 3-3. You look at the NFC, Eagles, Detroit, San Fran, struggling a little bit. Seattle, Dallas, Atlanta, winning, that kid kicking game-winning field goals left and right. Yeah, listen, Philadelphia coming out of the NFC, if Purdy's healthy, even though they stubbed their toe, I still say Philly and San Fran, whether it's 1A, 1B. I just don't see even Baltimore, as great as they are, I don't see them going on a road come playoff time and beating Kansas City. I just think you're asking,
Well, and
yeah,
yeah, home field advantage is huge, and KC, if they're playing in Arrowhead, they're very tough to beat, and we already know they got a 4-game lead in division over the Chargers right
yeah,
now. Going to win that division, and everybody's chasing them, and a lot of those AFC North teams are going to beat each other up, and uh, Baltimore's a half game ahead of Steelers and Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, yeah, Pittsburgh and Cleveland right now. So, and then you have Cincinnati in there as well, 3-3. So, very competitive division. And as you said, they'll probably beat up on each other, and then they have to go to Arrowhead. But the Eagles, between the Eagles and the Niners, I think whoever hosts that championship game in the playoffs, they're definitely going to be heavily favored in.
Listen, Belichick gets his 300th win, does it against the Bills. I mean, he just keeps. We look at Belichick, and it's funny. I've had a conversation. They've got the Miami Dolphins. Miami's laying 9.5, 10 in that one. But a lot of people are saying, hey, can you imagine if it goes by the wayside with the Giants get rid of Brian Dable? And Belichick has made it's the worst kept secret, his love affair with the Giants. I mean, he gets friggin' misty eyed. The guy is a robot, shows no emotion. You start
I
talking the Giants.
forgot he was a defensive coordinator
Yeah,
of that
sure.
first team
Yeah.
at North
He gets
Championship.
very, yep. His love fest, his love affair with the Giants and what the organization meant to him. And, there's this theory out there that if it really goes by the wayside, that, Belichick, if they finish with 4 wins and he gets fired, a quote, steps away, steps down, and he's available, the Giants would turn around and maybe offer. But again, it's tough, man. I think Dable's a good coach. I'm not as enamored with some of the antics at time. I'm not a fan of that, but I understand the passion how he fires up the team and whatnot. But they're playing hard. If they were playing under Judge or Shermer or McAdoo when things were going south, then all of a sudden you sit there and you're like, you got to get rid of this guy. Joe Judge got fired, A, because he was a bad coach, because he sounded like a friggin' jackass at the podium, right? Shermer was a horrible coach, and McAdoo had the Denny size menu. He had to go. So it would be interesting to see if the Giants really go south. They don't play hard. Jones is out for a while, and they win 4 or 5 games, maybe 4 games, and it's ugly. And Belichick's available. That conversation will be had. How can it
No, I
not?
agree. I agree with you too that if Kraft says enough's enough, whether he fires Belichick or he steps down, he's going to get another opportunity around the National Football League, and he's going to look at familiar spots to him. The Giants would be one of them, and he'll look around the league, and a lot of people would like to have his cachet that he brings to a franchise. Whether they give him full control or he's the head coach, but a lot of teams would want to him. And
Right.
I keep thinking of that Bear spot. If Eberflus loses, like we think he is, there's some pieces there in defense, and that would be his. They would give Belichick everything that he wants in terms of money and probably a length of contract there.
Lloyd Vance joining us Thursday edition of BYP. Kickoff week 8 already in the NFL. Good run, good slate of games. So we dived into that. Week 7, just rewind for a moment. I have an idea who you gave the game ball to. And I also have an idea who you gave the lackey to. I'm going to throw out, I think you gave the game ball to my guy, Captain Kirk.
I thought about it. If I went offense, he played a very good game. Lamar played a good game offensively, but defensively, you had to give it to Myles Garrett. He was a game wrecker, Q. He had 9 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 QB hits, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass defense. He had 2 forced fumbles, one of which was recovered in the end zone, was a huge touchdown in that game. And then he had the play of the year where he did a la Cam Chancellor. He jumps over the stack and blocks a kick. So it was a Herculean Superman type effort. So I had to give it to Myles Garrett, the defensive end for the Browns.
All right. Lackey. Was it a quarterback?
Yes, if you want to say he's a quarterback.
Was it Watson? No, wait, it couldn't have been Watson. Wait,
No, he didn't play like
if you want to say he's a quarterback,
joking.
wow, wow, that's a shot. Jeez. AFC or NFC?
AFC.
Who the hell stunk it up over the weekend?
You're never going to be. It's
What?
just good. We'll say it's good. You haven't been on Twitter. You haven't cheated and looked at the picks.
No, that's why I'm in. I need one more hint to solve the puzzle.
All right. His coach is forever loyal to him. He's followed this coach around, and he got a start when he probably shouldn't have. I probably gave it away.
Man, you know what? I'll bite. I'm
All right, Q. It's Brian Hoyer
wow. Yeah.
of the Las Vegas Raiders. He was terrible
Well, that's by
at
default.
38.
That's by default.
He should
Come
well,
on now.
Aiden O'Connell came in and he moved the football. They should just start the young kid because Hoyer should never start an NFL game. 17 to 32,
Killing the league.
129 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, including a pick six. They lose the game to the Bears, where they were heavily favored. It was 30 to 12. They lost to the Bears, and they were a 2-point favorite. And this is a key stat: he has not won a start since 2016, and he's lost 13 straight games in all his starts. So Hoyer should not start. He should almost be like a assistant quarterbacks coach at this stage in his career.
I'll regroup and get a bonus point here. I'm going to say that start was with the Bears.
It was with the Bears, yes.
He's been on like 7 teams, 5 teams.
Yeah, he's bounced around. He's got some rings as Tom Brady's caddy, and but he just can't get it done as a starting quarterback in NFL. And McDaniels, we talked about him being on a hot seat, and he needs to protect himself, and putting Hoyer out there in a game they probably should have won does not help their stance. Help his stance with Mark Davis, the owner there.
He's a bad coach.
He's another
really
one. He on that one victory against the Steelers where Tebow threw the out pass and
to the tight end.
He threw the out pass and he raced the end zone for the touchdown. That was his big playoff win, but he showed in Denver that he wasn't head coaching material. He goes and hides back underneath, Belichick's system. And then let's not forget, he went to, I think it was the Colts gave him the job. And then he said, no, I'll just stay with the New England rather than take the job. And now he's with the Raiders and he's trying to make it, Patriots West, but it's just not working there for the Raiders. They're another team that probably have to tear everything down and then rebuild from there.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's funny because, like, for instance, Jonathan Allen went off for Washington, right? He's tired of the effing losing, right? But then you have anonymous players coming out where they're saying, quote, I think everyone's frustrated. We share that frustration, but I can't think of one of us that really wants to see the coach fired in the middle of the season, just give up the year. Who does that? They're like backing him, but yet they're not a good football team. It might also be buyer's remorse with the veteran quarterback that they brought in who can't stay healthy, right? I mean, think about it. Garoppolo, the guy's never available. He's always hurt. It's an interesting dynamic there because once you have that love fest with the ownership and they're tied to the coach, i.e. Jerry Jones with McCarthy in Dallas, right? It's
and they're another team too. The Raiders are going to be national TV. They're playing on Monday Night Football at Detroit. And Detroit, as we said, is angry. They lost that game badly, and that's going to be a tough spot for the Raiders.
Don't forget, give Lloyd a follow on Twitter, and of course, catch him every Monday, 7 p.m. With Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Of course, part of the Broad Street South Network. We always appreciate his insight, as he likes to say. The season is just rolling along at Lloyd Vance, NFL writer, researcher, historian, of course, host of his own shows we just mentioned. Of course, PFWA award winner, ESPN NFL former contributor, and Black College Football Hall of Fame selection committee. He tweeted out the lackeys, the game balls, and all the other juicy little nuggets. How is Brian Hoyer, quarterback of the NFL?
I know. You try not to be harsh. It's funny, Q. Maybe one day I'll be in the locker room and he'll have some choice words for me.
I listen, man. I'll tell you what. I mean, what can he say? You just got to show him the game film.
Yeah,
You know,
you're a bum.
the film doesn't lie. All right, my friend. Always appreciate you jumping on BYP. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games. We'll do it again next week.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
You got it.